All right. So, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Chippy. I lead the design team at Ionics. Today, I hope to be able to throw some light on how design might help you guys build better products or platforms in the brokerage space. This is part one of a three-part series of webinars where we will be throwing more examples or screens and UI specifics in the brokerage space. Here's a little bit about our company. Ionics is a software solutions company, and we've been in the fintech space for about 8 years now. When the company started, the engineering team built many applications and helped a lot of our customers expand their product suite. And around this time, we felt a need to build a strong design team to add more value to our customers in terms of user experience. Now, I have worked intensively in the area of building creative teams and how to bring different creative competencies together. And with that knowledge, we built a design studio at Ionics. Here we specialize in what we call as a complex system or large platforms or a suite of products that interact with one another. That's what our studio specializes in. And apart from fintech, we've also expanded to other domains like healthcare, learning and coaching industry, Web3, and a few more. Now, when the studio began, and it was during one of our initial projects when the team was in its formative stages, we received an email from a customer of ours then. I've abstracted a line from many things she had written to us. So our users don't need to read a 50-page manual to figure how to use the interface. It was a very interesting feedback that we got back, and that's what user experience aims at also, in one of the many things that it aims at. So the team was very happy, and it kind of became an integral part of what we offer from the studio. It became a part of our identity. So that's who we are as a studio. Having said that, let's get started on design for brokerage. Today, we'll be discussing some guiding factors and some examples of how design can play a role in you building a product or platform or different interfaces in the domain. Now, when it comes to brokerage, these are some of the key factors that drive the design. So, now these factors are some of the factors that drive any enterprise software for that matter, but we pulled a couple of them out for you to sort of keep in mind while designing or developing a product or a product suite for in the brokerage space. Now, we are designing for the users, not the customers. Users have to follow organizational rules. This is guide number two. Then efficiency becomes very important. Large volume of data comes in play, and security requirements may be very strict. So we're going to keep these five areas in mind as we go through the presentation today. Now, these may be, like I said, these may be more or less applicable to most enterprise softwares. Now we will take a deep dive into how they look for brokerage solutions. The first one, the users and the customers are two different set of people. Now, while we design for the users who are internal staff, it impacts the customers who interface with the company through various channels, irrespective of whether they are interfacing with the users directly or not. Typically, in such a scenario, users spend long hours working. Their time commitment to the interface is very high, and therefore, it is essential for it to be designed for focus, fatigue management, for better efficiency. The most popular belief with expert users who spend their entire day working on a particular tool is that they'll get used to it. And therefore, it is not necessary to really bother spending time, money, and effort on that design. That's not true. The most fatigue they get, the little inefficiencies of the system can be felt by the customer as delays, etc. Now, here is a partner onboarding screen flow. The process goes through an approval process by many user types within the system. You guys know the drill. Now, these users should be able to see the same screen to have that reference in order to communicate effectively amongst them. Now, this brings about a cooperation internally, and the customer may experience this positively when things get done faster. So, this is how an efficiency of a user or a bunch of users can impact how a customer may be experiencing your business. Faster learning curve when it comes to a user. Now, the faster a user learns, that most efficient your business becomes, and your customers in turn experience the same too. I believe I don't need to explain the concept of tool tips here. There might be places where our designers have deliberately avoided tool tips as also so as to bring about efficiency by working with very clear labels. That's another way of doing it. Either you use tooltips or you focus on ensuring the labels are not ambiguous and they're very clear. Now, it's a call that needs to be taken carefully by study. So, when our designers are working with these softwares, they sit with the business stakeholders and they understand how the users are experiencing um, their everyday workflow, and then they take a call as to how they want to tackle this using labels or using tooltips. We always use a combination depending on the scenario. Minimizing errors is a core design principle, like it's a known factor now. Now, it can be put to use in a different way too. Here, the parts of the task that needs to be updated or changed is identified by the system automatically, and the user has to just make changes on those. Here are two securities that are merging. The system detects the part of them with conflicting data as errors, throws light on them for users to make the necessary amendments. It leads to a significant reduction in time, cognitive energy, and errors spent on managing merger events. This is an example of how a little automation can go a long way in terms of efficiency and error handling. Now, the second guiding factor that we saw back then was internal cooperation, that the internal users need to kind of collaborate, and there are certain organizational rules that they have to adhere to. Now, if an effective collaboration can also be brought about by design, these become a part of the UX goal while briefing itself. Let's take a few example of how this works or how this translates into design. All right. Here's an example of how internal behaviors can be influenced by design. Shares or companies are merging or splitting in this particular screen. A user's task is to check, verify, validate, and merge. Now, the task assignment and planning, let's say it's automated, and the assigned tasks appear either in a calendar view or as a list view with timelines mentioned. So the timelines are automated. It's a very small automation, but it can help the user in the long go. How? Now, planning, monitoring, and completion of the task within a time frame is expected to be achieved because that's what this interface is communicating with the user. Now, both the views, that is the calendar as well as the list views, are available for the users. They can choose what to work with or the one that they're most used to. Now, this is called the principle of familiarity, which is when users are able to work with a work in a familiar environment, their efficiency increases. Now, automating the timelines is also brings about a sense of time frame. These are the two behavioral principles that are explored in this interface in an attempt to bring about internal cooperation. Now, here is a user who is building a service model for a particular partner or a customer. Now, there are many service structures, and here is a comparison table for the user to know the nuances between the two different services that they can offer, and therefore make a best possible decision for the partner. Now, since the differences are nuanced and the information density has to be optimal to facilitate effective decision making, stage and status is denoted by color codes. So we are, playing around with color coding and tabulation for, easy understanding. Now, a traditional tabulation is replaced with what our lead designer on this project calls a rate card. So, whenever the user needs to look at a comparative information, they will be able to see it like a table. And when a user needs to view it like a rate card or like a singular set of data, then the brain can quickly readjust to view it in a different way. Let's say two users are discussing a case internally to help each other arrive at a decision. The layered informative interface will facilitate that conversation, therefore, enabling internal collaboration between different users. Now, the third thing that we saw as a guiding principle was the right or the optimal information density. We understand that in the brokerage space, there is lots and lots of data. Real estate is limited. This is probably the biggest challenge that uh, designers face while designing for brokerage. And sometimes adhering to the classic usability heuristics becomes a big challenge. So some rules have to be broken here. And how do we strike a balance? Let's take a look of some examples. Here's a common feature that uses tables. Now user selects the columns that makes the most sense to them and their task. So there's a long list of items that goes into columns. Now for every selection, so no, as a user selects a set of columns, there's a drop down over there. So they drop down and select, okay, these are the columns that I will be needing to finish or to work with my task today or my task every day, depending upon what is the nature of the job. And for every login or for every account, user account, these selections will be preserved as a setting until they wish to change, until their nature of task changes. Here's another example of the same, interaction with table. But it not only helps with managing real estate, which is more of a constraint management from a design side. Now, it also enables the user to keep data that is relevant and focus on the task to be completed, which is more of a task efficiency enablement for the user. How do we design filters by itself can be another detailed webinar. Now, here, whenever a user applies a filter, they appear on the top right. If you see with those, there's a blue area on the top. Now, the users don't have to go to the filter section repeatedly to clear or verify them. This saves time. So they can glance through on the top right part of the screen, or they can remove it. They can do a multiple set of things without having to click a filter and and see all the details below. I'd like to believe that interfaces are like physical spaces too. While we can't borrow more real estate, we can think about how to expand and shrink them, like modular furniture. Here, the filter area, once filtering tasks are done, they can collapse or shrink away, offering more space for the table beneath. I know it's a very little space, but managing these things when a larger set of data needs to come will really help the user uh, manage the real estate or see more data that is necessary for them to see. Understanding a user's task and the constraints they work are very crucial pieces of data as we are building or designing these interfaces. When a user has many modules open at a given point of time, example, account master, transactions, etc., and they're all linked to the same account. Now, the tab that was kept collapsed will have to reload while the user comes back to it from working from another tab. Now, preserving their states makes the interaction effective for the user to make data comparison without losing time that is taken for reloading. So even if it is like a minute, if it takes less 30 seconds to reload, in that 30 seconds, a lot of cognitive energy of the user is lost. So we are trying to preserve their cognitive energy while working with different tabs. Now, frequency of usage. Now, sometimes there are pieces of information which users don't need to access all the time, but they may need it frequently enough. One such feature is a summation of few columns of this particular interface that you can see on the screen right now. Now, loading time is also reduced because the computation happens only when the action is performed by clicking on the summation icon. So, this turned out to be a very useful feature as we were uh, designing some of these screens. Now, individual customers can be tagged as a partner. Now, these individuals can also have other accounts. They can have multiple accounts. Now, here is a layout design for showcasing all the accounts of a single customer. Now, significant amount of information needs to be above the fold, which is for it to be visible for the user at a single shot. Now, whenever the user needs to gather a large piece of information at a single glance, this would be useful. Now, these tabs carry a mini summary of what the tab is. That helps the user to gather data about different accounts they hold, and without having to drill down or navigate away from this layout. So, therefore, the user doesn't lose sight of the larger picture. Here is another partner onboarding process. Now, every step has a lot of data for the user to input, and therefore it has very long forms. Now, the proportion of the scroll to accommodate these long forms to the width of the screen is so long and tedious, the user may lose control of the task. So, chunking them into section is one way to do it, but scrolling needs to be tackled. Our designers have used tabs to navigate through them easily without missing any part of it. Now, a user doesn't have to endlessly scroll. We have not used a traditional wizard. You may ask why not a traditional wizard? Because the user may have to move about between the tabs while at this task. Now, in a wizard, it's you go one step after the other. Now, this flexibility to choose the order as well as focusing on one set of information at a given time without getting overwhelmed um, with the volume of data to be entered is achieved through this design. Reducing fatigue becomes a key goal of user experience design. Now, there is no negotiation when it comes to this. So based on the scenario or the nature of the task, it can be done in many different ways. And very small ways, these things will amount to um, how a user performs their tasks better in a given day. Now, here in this particular screen, the user needs to focus only on one set of data to gather information they need. Either they need to see a partner or a customer related data, or they need to work with the office related data. And these two requires compartmentalization. So the UI fades away in the background, allowing one set of data to be focused. This is just like a classic drill down without having to move away from the first screen, and a little different from that of a pop up because it retains partial information from the screen beneath, therefore, sort of establishing a context. Now, fatigue reduces when the user needs to see less
All
data.
right, cool.
So, the handling scale is the fourth guiding principle that we saw previously. Now, when it comes to expanding the applications or the product suite that you guys are building, we need a faster approach to both building and changing with times. Teams change, people come and go, sometimes even senior roles change. Now, we need something called as a design system, and appointing a curator to manage this system helps with scaling and expanding while maintaining consistency. It's not only about maintaining consistency. Let's say you want to build a completely new product and add to the suite of products, and you can assemble a new team and they can build using these design systems. I'll just give you an example of how it looks. So here it is. This is a small part of the design system. What the lists look like, what the buttons looks like, what the active buttons look like, what the disabled buttons look like, how the tables operate, and how there are certain navigational patterns that can also be consistent. Now they're all there in for the newer teams to pick and use them to build newer products within the suite. A curator comes very handy because, let's say, a new designer wants to add to a never seen before feature or a never seen before widget to the system. They can propose that. Then the curator can kind of match with the existing system and ensure it speaks the same design language and kind of add to the system. So the system also can grow and evolve along with the rest of the product and the business.
All right.
So, all the examples we explored today fall into one of these E's. While there may be parameters that come into play, these are the most fundamental, and more importantly, they're all measurable. So that brings us to the end. Thank you for joining us today. I hope today's session was useful. And we also have a part two coming in some time. We will keep you informed about it. In the meanwhile, if you have any queries around design for brokerage or anything that we discussed today, the 4 E's, or any of the design challenges that we face, please feel free to write to me, and that is my email. Um, we can get in touch. Or if you have any other business queries as well, we can get in touch. So thanks for joining once again. I'll see you on the next session.